Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom! It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Thank you for joining us today for part 2 with Kathie, one of my dear friends who is a mother of 7, grandmother of even more, and who loves to swear. Today we will get back into the differences between motherhood then and now. We hear why she's relieved she's not wrangling children today. We discuss how modern kids have shifted position in the family hierarchy. And then Kathie tells us an outrageous story about what she once did to make happy memories for her 7 kids that I think none of us today would even consider doing. So we're back here again with Kathie Neff, who had so many interesting things to say that we couldn't put it all in one episode.
Hello again. I think it's important for the listeners to know that I am what I call a motherless child, that I grew up really without a mother. There's a lot of things that come with that when you're talking about motherhood if you have not been mothered well. I had a lot of self-doubt about deciding this or that or figuring out how to manage and wrangle my kids. But I just think it was different things because we talk about the frustrations and I read what mothers are struggling with today. But I do know that motherhood is hard. It is hard. There's no getting around that it's hard. But I feel like it was hard in different ways then.
So how? What was different?
We didn't know enough to be worried about a lot of the things that mothers are worried about today.
Right.
So mothers today our whole society is more informed today than it was back then.
Now that we know more information, we're questioning everything.
Yeah. And part of that is technology,
right,
which we did not have a lot of. I don't know. It's just I don't want it to sound like I didn't struggle because I did.
Yeah.
But I did not struggle with the time it took to give to my children because I didn't really have enough of an evolved sense of self to be resentful about it. That probably came a little bit later.
And that's part of the conversation, too, about who you were before,
Exactly, just like you said.
Right,
yes.
Before you have kids versus so if you're an independent person who has lots of ideas and things going on and then you have kids, it's startling.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know who you were yet and knew what you were passionate about yet, kids could be that thing. So you have somebody who has, and you're similar, has 1,000 ideas and not enough time. And then you give that person kids.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, now I really don't have time, but I still have the 1,000 ideas.
Yeah. So it's almost like the order that things come in.
Exactly.
But I did come to a place of being able to put my ideas into actions in a variety of different ways. I got a babysitter. I remember thinking that I am being a model to my children, that their personal interests and what they care about are important. And also I discovered that if I went away for a little while, I came back refreshed.
Right.
If I was doing something non-kid, that when I came back, I had more energy.
How long did that energy last for you? Because I'll tell you, 2 nights ago, I went and 2 of my friends and I, we get a hotel room quite often and we check in at about 3 and immediately put on our pajamas and get in bed and watch TV and get room service. And it's amazing. And then as my friend pulled up to drop me off the other day afterwards, I said, so how long do you think it'll be before I'm frustrated again? So it's true that the consistent recharging and doing these things and modeling for your kids about having your own space is a wonderful thing and I think necessary. But how long did you personally find the refueling made you more patient? Like the minute you walk in and kids are asking you for food, although it sounds like your kids never needed snacks, which is amazing. But did you find that doing those things really gave you, was it like a slow burn of patience that you had when you returned home? Or was it pretty quickly you got home and it was all undone when you walked in the house?
Well, it was easier for long enough. I'm not the kind of person that delineates that. I just don't. My brain doesn't work that way. I wish it did. It felt it tangibly. And then when it started to wear low, I would need another inoculation.
That's the thing. And I feel like the younger your kids are, the more of those you need.
Absolutely.
The more of those shots that you need. Whereas when they get older and the needs are a little bit less intense, you go away. And there's definitely times now when I go away and I come back and I'm just excited to be with them and it lasts longer. But man, I remember when they were younger, when there were naps to be gotten and all of those things when you come home. And it's like almost sometimes how how everything waited for you. It was like none of the things that you would normally be getting done would the babysitter do, or maybe your husband. So when you come home, it's like you have double the work. It's the work of the last hour plus the work of the present moment. So I think it's also about being smart about when you leave and take the time. You got to have somebody doing your job while you're gone so it doesn't pile up. Wait for you. See, strategies. I mean, that's what's amazing to me is I never realized about motherhood how many strategies one would have in place for everything. And maybe that's just the way my brain works, because I'm always trying to make everything the most stress-free, which is a little bit ironic, right? But you know, it's like when you have small kids, there's kind of a way to do everything that gives you more sanity, but you have to think about it beforehand. Like when you're going somewhere, and maybe you didn't do this, but I know me and every other mom I know, you have to have snacks with you. See, how did you not live that life? I mean, and maybe it's that your kids didn't grow up with it, so they didn't expect it, but like...
I'm sure I had something. We had bags of Cheerios or something.
When we go to the park, every mom has a fucking, like, mountain backpack, and in that thing is, like, snacks for days.
That's amazing.
And so many of the people have all these, like, super healthy things that it's just like, oh, we've got dried mangoes and almonds, you know, I mean, so it's like, it's not even just fill it with whatever shit you can find. It's the thoughtfulness of motherhood now. I don't know that it's healthy.
When I was a little girl, the family would go to Griffith Park, and these mothers prepared a whole breakfast on the barbecues at Griffith Park. Okay, I did that once, and I was like, how in the world did they even do this? Maybe it's random. I don't know.
It might be, although, and maybe it's a personality thing or a generational thing, but your fun level is just above and beyond most of the moms that I know. There was a story that you told. There were a bunch of us women at your house for a fire ceremony, which is one of the things that we love to do. What does your husband call? What does he say?
He calls it howling at the moon.
Yeah. Where a bunch of us women get together and we do a meaningful ritual and then talk and cry about life. You know,
the normal.
You know what everybody else is doing. But I remember you just said something, and I don't even remember what context. It was a bunch of other newish moms or had young kids. And you told us this story about going to get donuts. Will you tell us that story? And we were all just, our jaws dropped. We were like, we would never consider doing this.
This was the piece of the child in me that I think the child in me is still really strong. I don't know what that is about archetypes because I can go there quickly in a second. But anyway, I don't know why the idea came into my head. But I know that I did have a strong feeling of responsibility to give happy memories to my children. And to me, a happy memory can be something like outrageous. So one day, after consulting with my husband, telling him what we were going to do, we woke up the kids at about 3 or 4 in the morning.
Okay, stop. This is where already... This is like every person listening to this is like, why would you wake up? And this is 7 kids. This isn't even just one kid.
Yeah. Right.
Why would you wake up kids in the middle of the night? Okay.
Well, because we were going to make a happy memory. And so I got it in my head. You know, you are guilty of this too, Brandy. You have an idea a minute and I have an idea a minute. We're trouble when we're together.
That's right. Yes.
But so I got this idea that we would wake the kids up. We would have them come into the car in their pajamas, and then we would drive to the beach and watch the sun come up. And that's exactly what we did. We just went into their rooms and said, come on, we're going to go. We're going to go on an adventure.
Oh my God.
Go potty. And then this was when they didn't have seatbelts. So we threw them all in the back of the car, folded all the seats down, threw them all back there, threw a bunch of blankets, threw a bunch of pillows, and drove to the beach. And when we got to the beach, we ran to the swings, and we were swinging while the sun came up. I don't think they were even looking at the sun come up, but
of course,
but we were.
That's on point.
But they were swinging on the swings, and then we went and got donuts, and then we drove home.
It's just the most beautiful thing. This is where I feel like the modern parenthood. So many of us, and again, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I know there's other moms that think like me, but this fun element that doing it the right way or trying to mitigate the amount of crying. The first thing that would go through my mind is, okay, if I wake the kids up in the middle of the night, they're probably going to be cranky, and then we're going to put them in the car, and then what if they have to go to the bathroom? But then the next day, well, do they nap? Well, what if they don't nap? If they don't nap, it's like all of that sort of strategy stuff. And I love in that moment when you told us that story, story, it was like all of us were like, yeah, that's more important actually, to let go of all of those strategies and have that beautiful moment.
I mean, I don't know if it was strategy free, but it was present moment.
Yes. Right.
It wasn't future. And there have been plenty of times that I've gotten trouble from being present moment. I would be at school talking to a mom in the parking lot waiting for the kids to come out. And I'd say, yeah, it's a pretty big project we have coming up on the 23rd. And they said, yeah, tomorrow. And I'm like, in my head, tomorrow? But this is the brain that I live with.
Right. And this is the difference between us.
Yeah.
Is that I'm in
Totally.
future mode.
Totally.
So much of the time. And that's one of the things I so appreciate about you is that present momentness. And it's so fun to dip into my child with you. And what I think is so interesting about it is because of our age gap, you would think it would be the other way around, but it's not. And that's one of the things that I just really, really love. And so you remind me about that side, which I have a huge child in myself. I feel like in this world, I'm perpetually like a 15-year-old boy, sort of, in a way. So I have this child side too, but the tasks of motherhood get in the way of that for me. And so I think you bring a great reminder to have these fun, happy memories. It doesn't matter what happens the next day with the nap. Your kids will remember how cool that was. I mean, I just think that's not really something my parents would have done either. So I just think you bring to it just a fun element that, you know, if we could ask ourselves, okay, what's one outrageous thing that I could do for my kids, do with my kids this week? How fun would that be to come up with something super harebrained?
So you go and you put do you have a tree?
Somewhere in a park.
Okay, so you bring a little fold-up table, and then you put a can of shaving cream for each one.
No. See, no.
And then they make hairdos out of it. I mean, we had 2 big trees, and I swear they spent most of the summer, good weather, outside under the trees.
Yeah.
Or in the trees. We have these good friends of mine who our kids grew up together say, oh, I remember those trees. And they just imagination, childhood imagination. It's like the free stuff.
Yes.
Now, however, when we would go to certain friends' house and they had very good jobs and they had a lot of the best and the newest toys for their children, I always felt sorry for our kids then because we didn't have that. We did not have the latest and the greatest. We did not have the whole Star Wars series with all the things. And when we went to visit them, if we would go to dinner, we wouldn't see them for hours because they were just like, this is the best. But then when kids came to our house, what they reported was that they were allowed to get dirty because that's what we had. We had big trees, we had dirt, mud, grass, dogs, always. So the ones that didn't have dogs in the house, they loved our dog, and they were allowed to get dirty. In fact, we would tell them, don't send them in something good, you know, because
I grew up with a really large backyard and played all sorts of things out there. And I look around, I mean, where I live here in Southern California, we barely have a backyard. It's like a pathway. But what we do have that is similar to what you're talking about is we live on a cul-de-sac where cars can't park. So, and we have kids all on our street. And so the kids will go out there and scoot around and play games and pretend. And that is one of my favorite things about watching their childhood is seeing that we have that. And I know there's a lot of people that don't have either of those, but I think having that space for imagination is so important. And I feel like it's one of the things of modern parenting that a lot of us who grew up living like that, doing cartwheels in our backyard, playing on our swing set, we are not parenting in the same way because of our constraints. But I'm not surprised to hear that the kids found such value in coming to your home because it's not about the things, right? And I'm sure you were like the fun house as much as the parents thought.
Until we got to junior high. Okay. And nobody came to our house after that.
Why?
We were too strict.
Just with like having parental supervision?
Yeah, the boy-girl thing.
Oh, yeah. People were looking for makeout dens and you weren't providing them?
Yeah, we weren't provided them. Yeah. I'm glad I'm not wrangling kids right now, let me tell you. I love our kids, but there's a time for that, and we were lucky that we were young because we had a lot of energy to keep up with them.
Yeah, at 17.
And when they began leaving home, we still had energy.
That's right.
But by then, I had a full-time job, so I never ended up babysitting the grandkids totally. It just was logical that I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And so I'm not the grandma that has the kids all the time, but I'm happy when we do have them.
So one of the things, that modern mothers, we sometimes will find ourselves at Target and there'll be a grandmotherly type that says to us, oh, enjoy every minute. Oh, those are the most precious moments of your life. And I know for most of us, we get the beautiful intention behind it, and yet it's annoying. And I always wonder, fuck, are they right? And so I have to know that, of course, when I'm their age, I'm going to look back on all these yummy kid moments and wish I could go back for a moment. I don't think I would ever want to go back and do it all over again, the whole time chunk that it takes, right? Because it's not just a moment. And that's what's so tough is I feel like people see a little snippet and then they speak about the snippet, but they speak about it in a bigger way. And so I'm curious, from your point of view, do you feel like, oh, I would go back and do it all over again? What do you think about when people say those things to moms?
It's kind of 1950-ish, where they romanticize everything.
Yeah.
I have regrets. I would not want to go back and do everything over exactly the same, although I could not bear to leave out any of the children now that I've met them all,
Right.
I couldn't bear it. I mean, it's this idea of perfection, right? It's like perfection is not real. Intention is real. If I'm lucky about something with my family, it's that they really get that our intentions have always been good. I have failed them in many ways, as my husband has, as we have failed each other. But there is something about the failing that is important too. And so that's why I think it would be silly to go back and try to write every single thing, because what would it be for? It would be for the pride of saying we did it correctly, or we did everything, quote, right. We didn't, because we're humans. We lost our temper. Sometimes I zoned out. If I was going through something, they probably watched too much TV or they...
Sure.
But it's an imperfect life. So you do your best.
It's part of being human.
Exactly.
There's no other way.
The one thing that I did that my parents did not, I apologize if I make a mistake. I apologize to my kids, and I am sincere, and so that's why I say, I think if I were to interview them and ask them about my intentions, I think 201 they would say that my intention was always positive.
So, at the beginning when I said, you're out of the trenches of motherhood, and you gave me that response, what does motherhood look like now when you have grown children who are in their 40s-ish and you have grandchildren? What are you doing now as a mother?
It's wonderful and terrible, just like life. They're always your babies. I mean, as I look at this grown-up person who's taller than me, and it's my baby. It's still my baby. And so I want to keep them from harm, but I am unable to keep them from harm. It is not possible. Between whatever they decide is right at the time, which I know what it's like to think something is absolutely right and then figure out it was totally fucking wrong.
Yeah.
So I have my whole life that I've lived, I know those traps. And then I also know life, and life throws stuff at us.
So it's that feeling like when they're younger, kind of what you're saying, you could pick somebody up and take them somewhere if you had
safety,
to.
pretty much.
So pretty much you're in this smaller bubble where you can control some of the safety things.
Yeah.
But now, and especially when they're older, the things that they're doing, like there's no protecting them from anything.
Exactly. And if they would listen, which they don't, because we've raised them to be very independent and to follow their own counsel. I don't know why we did that. But even if they wanted to know what to do, I could not anywhere tell them what to do, because it's all a crapshoot.
Right.
The things I'm trying to figure out still are a crapshoot.
Right. So logistically, what does it look like for you? Do you have kids calling you every single day? Do you talk to kids once a week?
Nothing works on a recipe like a spreadsheet, for sure.
Damn it, Kathie.
I know.
I want the tidy.
I know. On Sunday, I saw 3 of my kids in person and talked to 2 of them by the phone, which is 5 out of 7. That was a really good day.
Okay.
But it's not the common. And I have a friend of mine, her daughter calls her every single day. I was like, oh, every single day? I'm just like, really? I mean, this is in my head. I'm not saying it to her. And as far as seeking advice, and these kids have this little network and they go to each other first. And then there's a saying that gets repeated to me once in a while. You need to talk to mom. So I'm like the last resort or something.
That's genius. That's sort of, in a sense, why you have multiple kids. Is they like take some of the weight off of you. Like, you guys can all nurture each other and then come to me if that's not good enough. But I mean, that's what I look at your family, and I wish I grew up in a family like that. I always wanted to have a family that just had the possibility for connection in a lot of different places. Yeah. And that sort of like that community. I mean, family, really.
But it's colorful also.
Sure. Yeah,
because
I'm sure.
they all have their own opinions, and sometimes they're trying to boss each other around. That never goes good.
They're still bossing each other around at 40?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's subtle.
Yeah, right.
And then sometimes not so subtle if there's a little emergency of sorts. But it's usually mostly cordial, and then comes back around to that forgiveness piece. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article on Facebook day before yesterday, and it was intended as medicine for my son, because right now some difficult things are happening personally, and in the midst of that he has this big dream. And I apologized to him actually on the phone. I said, I'm sorry that the dreamer part of me, I think I maybe passed it on to you in my genes. I said, because it's a hard road to hoe to really put yourself out there with a dream. Mm-hmm. Anybody who has ever dreamed knows that. And you're continually being misunderstood and sometimes judged, But I just talked to this son on Sunday for a long time, and I said, I get it, take care of yourself, but I get it. Yeah. I really get it. Right. What you're trying to do, I recognize it.
How lucky he is to have you be able to see him. I'm always really moved by parents who can see their kids for who they really, really are, and not just a construct of what they want them to be.
I think there have been people in my life who have done that for me. I was told once by a nun when I was trying to work out all this motherhood thing for 30 years, she said...
Wait a minute. Let's go back to that. When you were trying to work out this motherhood thing for 30 years.
Yeah.
I feel like that right there is the thing that we all needed to hear. Is that it's a thing that you try to work out for 30 years. Okay, keep going. Just wanted to point that out.
She said, I just want to remind you that what you need does not always come from the place you expect it to. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have a mother figure, but what her words gave me was a new opening of my eyes to find it in other places.
Yes.
And so much of what I have tried to pass on to my children did not come in the linear form. It didn't come from at least where I thought it would come from.
Yeah.
Each mother, the most important task they have is to mother themselves. You got to steel yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the self-care thing, was that a thing back when you were mothering small children? Was it called self-care?
I'm trying to think.
I feel like what we call self-care now was just normal parenting back then. You can go play tennis, leave your kids at home. You can have a couple drinks. You can go smoke with your friends. All of these things that parents did back then, that they were taking me time, but it wasn't like, oh, she's self-caring. No, she's just being my fucking mom.
Yeah, I don't think it was called self-care. And I'm not sure even if it was self-care, some of those things, right? Because there was clearly a hierarchy, and the children were in the pit. I mean, the children were the pit. That's what turned around. When that whole generation of children grow up, they were the ones that said, oh no, we're going to handle our children differently.
This is groundbreaking. Yeah. This is like this line of thinking is we've gone from both ends. I mean, I definitely know that I felt that way, not because my parents weren't awesome and didn't provide for me, but we fit into their life.
Yeah.
And so now we've swung the complete other way where it's to the point where every word you say to your kid has to be managed. Not that people actually do that, but the articles you read, everything that's coming out is like, oh, well, don't ever say this to your kid. So it's like everything is so micromanaged when back then we weren't even considered.
Every word feels very weighty.
Yes.
And,
like you're going to mess your kid up if you say that. Like one of the things that I know is when I went to elementary school, we went to the elementary school that was in our neighborhood. motherhood. There was no question about it. So now when I have kids, I'm researching all the different schools. I go on tours of all of them. I learned this when we lived in Colorado, and I had a spreadsheet of, of all the different things that I could come and make just this really thoughtful decision. Well, what kind of learner is my son? And what kind of environment does this provide? And then I could choose which school would fit that. And I just had to laugh because I thought my parents never thought about what kind of learner I was. I mean, sometimes I didn't even think they really knew who I was. But to go a step further, well, how does she learn? Is she auditory? Is she kinesthetic? Like, what is happening? So then I did that one time. And then when we moved here, I was like, we're going to the school that we live near. So it's funny that we go to all these lengths to mitigate, some of the trauma or neglect. I feel like parenting in the 70s today would be considered neglectful. But so it doesn't mean that we need to go this whole other way now, but I feel like we're all in this place of like, well, but what do we need to do?
What do we do?
What do we do? How do we do it?
I'm no expert, but you can be guaranteed that you're going to make mistakes, and to be present and own that which is yours and apologize if it was from you, I think is wonderful medicine. I don't think there's not enough of it in the world. I think your statement is really important. Well, when we moved here, we're going to go to the school in the area. That's it. In a way, that's saying there's going to be some problems wherever you are.
Right. That's the thing. At the end of the day, no matter if you make the perfect choice, humans are still involved.
Exactly.
We're all part of this. So there's going to be flaws everywhere.
There will be.
This overthinking, which I think is a part of this era of parenting, it's just going to be so funny in a really dark way when our kids are older. What are their neuroses? And it's probably going to be from being placed too high because we're so thoughtful about them.
It's hard to say, but I will say that at one time I wanted the kids to go to Catholic school because I was moved around to a lot of different schools, and I wanted them to have what I thought was going to be the safeguard of them in life. That was the missing piece, okay? When we had our 7 kids in Catholic school, was more than our house payment.
God, I can't even imagine.
And at the end of the first 2's high school, they came and they sat down with us and they said, Mom and Dad, because it was time for the little ones to start moving up that way. I know what you thought you were giving to us, but it's really not there. So I just want to let you know you should probably skip it with the rest of them.
Oh my God.
I mean, you talk about an eye-opener. Like, what? And so the rest of the story is the next 5 all went to public school. They had the benefit of amazing plays in the theater group. They joined band. We heard them.
Yeah.
We heard them.
I'm amazed that your kids could articulate that and thought that it was important enough to articulate. And so sweet. They were looking out for
They were looking out for their brothers and sisters.
That's beautiful. And I love that it aligns with you not having to spend that money. My really frugal side was like, they just saved you thousands of dollars.
$.
I know you've given us some great tidbits here and some great wisdom, and I'm so grateful for. So thank you for coming and being open and having this conversation. I'm sure this is how you and I work. I'm sure the second you leave my house, I'm going to have a WhatsApp message from you. Oh, the thing we forgot to say. That's what we do. We go sit for 3 hours and have our delicious lunch at our favorite place together, and then we get in the car and we WhatsApp each other. Is there anything that you would tell other moms out there who are struggling with the intensity of having small children who are trying to do their best and sometimes not remembering that they really are doing their best? What sort of lovely Kathie-isms or Kathie words would you have for them?
Well, I would say be on your own side. Factor yourself in when you're making your list of failures, factor yourself in about how hard it can get trying to help humans that sometimes don't want to be helped. And as far as the future, which I think most of us, that's where worry, it seems like, calls us to, is the future. I think it was important that at some point we said to our kids, there's nothing that you can ever do that will make us not love you. Nothing. They've tested us on that a little bit. But I think that love and forgiveness keeps us going. And it's not a thing that you do once. You do it over and over and over. but it's a safe place for kids to grow up. It's safer than good snacks. It's safer than, whatever it was I thought I was saving them from and during that phase of my mothering.
Yeah.
But I guess I don't mean that to say that there's not consequences, because there are consequences. But seeing them through the consequences, not making them exceptions to the consequences, that's love too. They will fail and we fail.
That forgiveness piece is really, to me, the antidote of trying to get it right.
Yeah.
It's been a tough one for me personally in my life. I didn't know how to apologize until I married my husband. I didn't grow up in a family where anybody apologized for anything. But you don't know that when you're growing up in it, right?
Right.
And then you get into a relationship with somebody and you are an asshole for a moment or do something. And then, I legitimately did not know how to apologize. It was not in my bones at all. And so I loved my husband, who wasn't my husband at the time because we dated for 9 years. He helped me feel safe enough to apologize, to be able to say those words and not feel ashamed and a bad person. That can be a tricky thing for people who didn't grow up with that modeling. And I was lucky enough to have a really wonderful husband who could teach me that and knew that. But what if you get two people together who both didn't know how to say I'm sorry when they were jerks? And I notice with my kids, that's one of the things I want to always make sure that I apologize to them so that they know how. But the other night, my son was trying to tell me something and it had just been like a day. I could tell that I was zoning out. And then later that night, my husband says to me, "Oh my God, your face when he was trying to tell you about that thing, it was just hilarious." But I felt bad. I felt like the only choice is to the next day say, "Hey, last night when you were trying to tell me about that thing, I was probably pretty checked out and I just want you to know I'm sorry. And also that had nothing to do with you. That was about my day." That for me has been one of the big things, letting my kids know what's them and what's me. And most of the time it's me. There's sometimes it's them when they're super shitty for whatever reason, but you're spot on about the forgiveness piece. And I think that it undoes some of the trauma that we're worried about doing to our children.
They say that when the tension is there and is not dealt with, that they breathe it in as if it's their fault.
I think I remember feeling like that as a child. I think I can remember that.
I did too. And so when things are not talked about, it's like the default is, oh, what did I do?
Exactly.
What have I done?
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make. Oh, thank you again. You are just seriously the best person I know.
Oh, wow.
You just are. You're
so sweet.
Yeah. No, you're the best. And I'm so glad our paths crossed when they did. And I thank you for coming on here and sharing all that you did. So you'll definitely be back. I'm like, we've scratched the surface here today.
I know. She's all, I can't wait to turn this machine on because I'm going to ask you about that thing.
No, I know, right? I need to know more. Yeah, there's a couple things. There's a couple things I need to know more about. All right,
thank you, Brandy.
Thank you, my friend. Love you too. Thank you, everybody, for listening, for your support, for sharing, for being into this podcast the way that I'm into this podcast, for supporting me on Patreon financially. It's amazing, for all the awesomeness that you are, and for helping me find this thing that I love to do, and for receiving it. I'm a sarcastic, cynical, dark, and twisty person, but I'm also possibly moved to tears. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm not gonna cry at the end every time. I promise you.
Here I am.